And I realized that there were these two really different populations, obviously shelter animals and military veterans, who had complementary needs for validation and security and love and permanence and loyalty. And I thought if I could find a way to get them together, make pet adoption easier and more affordable for our military veterans, and at the same time save more of the most overlooked animals' lives, maybe that.
Beth, welcome to the podcast today. Grow Healthy, Help People is the podcast that we put out talking with nonprofit leaders of great organizations. You lead Pets for Patriots. Tell me where you're calling in from today.
I'm calling in from New York, and thank you so much, Shay, for this opportunity to introduce our mission and work and everything that came to be about Pets for Patriots to your audience.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you today. Before we dive into Pets for Patriots, tell me a little bit of your background, maybe your education, and then what your first few jobs were, and then what got you into the nonprofit space.
Great question. How much time do we have?
Right, as
Just
much as you
teasing.
need.
I know, just teasing. Well, as an undergraduate, I studied philosophy and actually was all prepared to go for my PhD. I've been accepted at a few wonderful universities to go that path, and I had the dawning realization that pretty much that would allow me to do two things: write or teach. I love writing, but didn't want to be restricted to just writing about philosophical matters, and teaching just isn't in my DNA. So I spent the next year doing various jobs and doing informational interviews with people who worked in different professions that I thought might suit the way my mind works. I really did a lot of introspection and said, well, what do I like to do and what am I good at? And I'm kind of both a right and a left brain person. I'm, decent at a lot of things and not expert at any one, the classic jack of all trades. And I ended up sort of honing in on architecture of all things because it spoke to my creative side. It spoke to my love for solving complex problems and creating very elegant solutions from them, and just seemed to sort of tie up a lot of the things that I was good at and perhaps could do meaningful work. So I was narrowing my informational interviews with obviously, people who were working in various stages and different types of architecture. Applied, went to Carnegie Mellon, where I got my Master of Architecture, and for a decade worked as a practicing architect in Manhattan, and absolutely loved my work,
Uh-huh.
but still felt like something was missing. And it's like, oh no, here we go again. um, so not being afraid of change, but wanting to make smart change. I didn't just quit my job and, start looking. I started to think, what is it that I feel like is missing? And for me, it was a sense that while I got to do really fabulous, fabulous work in architecture and in creating these wonderful built environments, those things seemed divorced with every other way these companies, for the most part, they were businesses, went to market, whether it was their communications, their marketing,
Mm-hmm.
what have you. And I began to understand this was sort of before branding was a really big thing, that kind of branding was maybe more the direction I wanted to go, where I could work on all the ways a company went to market and introduced themselves to the world and to their customers and make a difference there. So I went back to my instincts in informational interviewing and asked various people who were very senior in marketing if I could, in branding, if I could, spend 15, 20 minutes with them and picking their brains. And it was a really terrific experience because these people became sounding boards for me as I started my journey searching for that next job. I worked in branding and marketing for several years and then transitioned to hang up my own shingle doing business strategy because I found that branding and marketing, while wonderful and very fulfilling for a lot of the reasons I was seeking, sometimes was divorced with the business strategy of the company. These two things really have to be in sync and in harmony. And did that for, oh my goodness, 10, 12 years maybe a little bit more because it overlapped a little bit with when I launched Pets for Patriots. And that is a story in itself.
So you launched Pets for Patriots. What year did you launch the organization?
I formally the organization was legally formed in 2009, but we launched in January 2010. So it's been a little over 16 years.
16 years. So
Yeah.
there was obviously a passion there under the surface or passion in your life that caused you to start this organization with this mission. Tell us about that passion and maybe your history that made you want to start Pets for Patriots.
Yeah, it was a very seemingly random thing. I'd never run a nonprofit before. I never worked for a nonprofit. My sole experience with nonprofits was, writing a check to causes that I care about. So it definitely was not in my dance card at the time. Um, and I very distinctly remember it was Memorial Day of 2009,
Okay.
when I had my mother and her then companion, who was a World War II belly gunner who had done 33 sorties over enemy territory. And I had them over for a barbecue because, what does everybody do on Memorial Day? We barbecue, and we're grateful for those who give us the freedom to barbecue on Memorial Day. And after I drove them home, I was doing the dishes where I'm ashamed to say I get my best ideas. And I just had this nagging idea of veterans and pets, veterans and pets, veterans and pets. And I don't know why that kind of came into my mind because my mother and her companion, at that stage did not have a dog or a cat in their lives. They didn't have pets. And I grew up with pets, but it was just one of those things I kind of let it noodle and fester in my mind. And then I started doing some research. I'd always been in a family that had shelter pets and adopted dogs, and so they were not unknown to me, but I didn't really know their plight. I didn't really know a lot about why do animals enter shelters and what are the chances of them getting out and having a successful outcome. And what are some of the barriers to people adopting in the first place? And why do people who give up their pets do so? And at the same time, I was also trying to understand more about what do veterans experience at various stages of both their military and lives in general. What's it like to come home after being away? What's it like to be sent away from your loved ones for training? What is it like to, have to be far from family and friends for extended periods of times and all the unknowns that everybody goes through at various stages of their careers. And I realized that there were these two really different populations, obviously shelter animals and military veterans, who had complementary needs for validation and security and love and permanence and loyalty. And I thought if I could find a way to get them together, make pet adoption easier and more affordable for our military veterans, and at the same time save more of the most overlooked animals' lives, maybe that was something. So, super quick, I created a business plan because I knew how to do that. I shopped it around with some of the folks I had gotten to know in business over my 25 plus years at the time in business, poke holes in it, make it better, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
That's great. So when you started the organization, this was a new industry, new leadership role. What were the first few days, weeks, months, and even a few years? What were those like starting the organization from the ground up?
A little lonely, to be honest, because, I wasn't being paid. Obviously, there was nothing to pay me with, and there was nothing to be paid for. Thankfully, I still had my solopreneurship and as a business strategist, and
Yeah.
I needed that to keep obviously a roof over my head and food on the table. And it was just, me, my day job, filling in every possible minute with a donated website that somebody had made for us.
Yeah.
I found that as soon as I started talking about the idea with people and what the idea was about, people were eager, people that I knew were eager to contribute. So someone I knew contributed the website. I got someone else to contribute the legal work to help us get our 501(c)(3), all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But initially it was just me, phone, a computer, and just a lot of determination, a lot of hearing no, thank you, never heard of you before, that kind of stuff. And I just knew that if I just kept at it, that
That it
something would
would work.
happen. And in 2010 we had like all of 5 adoptions,
Uh-huh.
and I made sure to document those stories because I knew if we just had enough proof of concept, eventually it will snowball. And the year after we had like 70 adoptions, and the year after it, every year it just got more and more to the point where 2025 we had our largest single year of adoptions ever, 558. And
Wow.
earlier this year we surpassed 5,000 adoptions. We have programs in over 260 communities in 40 states and still growing all the time. So it's
That's
just kind of taken on a life of its own. And I would say it was probably about year 3 that I brought in almost simultaneously 2 volunteers. I couldn't even tell you. Oh, one of them actually was an adopted through our program, a Vietnam veteran.
okay.
And shortly thereafter, once we had sort of enough to be able to afford them because we needed them as we were growing and I couldn't continue to do literally everything,
Yeah.
they to this day are still our 2 employees in addition to me. Ted is
That's
our
great.
director of veteran outreach, Vietnam veteran, combat veteran, Marine. And Susan is our other jack of all trades who does a lot of our partner relations and working with our adopters as well.
That's great. So tell me more specifically about the programs that you guys run.
Yeah. Well, the core program is our Welcome Home Adoption program, and that's sort of the essence of what I was describing to you is how can we make pet adoption easier, more affordable for veterans on the condition that they adopt from one of our shelter partners, of which there are, again, over 260,
Wow.
and adopt a dog or a cat that's most overlooked for adoption, those being adult pets, those with special needs, those who are chronically homeless, and also large breed dogs. Put them together, and these are the dogs that language most in shelters, are more likely to be killed or more likely to face chronic homelessness if not adopted.
Yeah.
So in exchange for adopting, one of these sort of more overlooked dogs and cats, we provide a very broad range of benefits, both direct and indirect, to our adopters.
Yeah.
Directly, we order them a $200 gift card to help with welcome home pet food and basics. We give them access to a secure part of our site where we've curated discounts from major pet retailers on everything from medication, supplies, treats, toys,
Yeah.
and so forth. We also have a few different channels of discounted veterinary care because we know that pet care, if you have a pet, it's very expensive to keep the pet healthy. And
Mhm.
if something goes wrong, it's even more expensive. So we have partnerships with brick and mortar veterinarians, a
Mhm.
leading vet telehealth provider, as well as VIP pet care clinics around the country in pet stores and in select Tractor Supply stores. And then we follow up with every adopter for a minimum of a year. And that's what really I think is our secret sauce, Shay, is veterans feel heard. They know there's somebody there who cares about them. They're always shocked when we pick up the phone and call them. And they know that whether it's months or even years after their adoption, if they need help, we're here. And that's what led us to two tangential programs, which I'll just speak about briefly, our Hero Fund for veterinary care and our Hardship Fund. And both are designed to prevent surrender of pets back to the shelter for reasons of short-term personal crisis or financial hardship that our adopters may be experiencing. If for a few $100s or sometimes more, we can keep a veteran and pet together who are going through a little bit of a hard time by either providing necessary veterinary care or food support. Well, that's just a win-win for everybody. So those programs have become increasingly necessary as many of our adopters, sort of age on or, are onto their second or third pet or have a hard time and so forth.
Yeah. That's great. So this work obviously costs a good bit of money now. You're running an organization, a few employees, 40 states. What is the primary funding source for Pets for Patriots?
The good news is there is no one primary funding source because that would otherwise leave us vulnerable to if that funding source went away. So we, from the get-go, have always pursued a very healthy mix of individual donations, corporate donations, workplace giving programs, um, donor advised funds, bequests, people, leaving something to us in their will or their life insurance, vehicle donations, not just cars, boats, trucks, motorcycles, boats, trailers, the whole 9 yards. So if there's a way to give, just about all of, we've tried to find it and participate in it because we know that, first of all, people like flexibility. They want to give the way they want to give, and they should be able to. And, some people are more about maybe looking for a tax advantage way to give. Others maybe have, a clunker that they no longer need and just want to get rid of it and know that it's going to a good cause. So pretty much anything and everything you can imagine, just about, we do. And we recently, this year, we're very excited, launched peer-to-peer fundraising. So that's very new to us. We're still experimenting with it, and we hope that folks sign on to whether it's raise $50 for us or 500 or 5,000. We would put it all to good use.
Yeah, that's great. What are some of the challenges you experience as you're running your organization, as you're running Pets for Patriots? What are things that feel like they're just piling up in your plate and are not super life giving? You think, man, I just have to navigate this all the time.
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's tough being lean. On the one hand, donors obviously and grantors want to know that, you're not profligate with their money and that you're a good steward of their largesse as they should. At the same time, it's tough being lean because sometimes the slightest little rock in the boat will toss you overboard. So that's an ongoing challenge. I'm not really sure unless we get, much bigger, how that will ever be different. You
Yeah.
know, that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. So, as you and others, a quick little word about Accordis, our company. We like talking to nonprofit leaders. What we do is nonprofit back office, accounting, database, and marketing. So, Beth, as you or others watching this podcast are leading your organizations and you go, man, We love the mission. We love matching the veterans with the adoptive pets. We love, whatever the programs are, but I don't love the database work, and I don't love having to get receipts out all the time, and I don't love having to get the 990 prepared for the IRS. If those things are piling up on your plate, let us know. We'd love to help with that. We'll put our website, accordus.com, at the end of this podcast, as well as Beth's website, petsforpatriots.org. Beth, question for you. What is a desired 5 years from now set up for Pets for Patriots? Where do you hope you are in 5 years?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, first of all, we hope to have a flag in all 50 states. We we've long since learned that quality over quantity really matters as we grow. I think we were much more aggressive early on, trying to be in as many states as possible, and yet didn't have the mechanisms to necessarily um, keep and continually nurture and check in with the shelter partners we have, who themselves go through a great deal of flux in staffing. If you work with animal shelters as long as we do, and we work with some of the big networks down to small rural shelters, one thing that's a common thread is there's always a ton of turnover. Sometimes it's internal, people moving up to different positions, and that's great. And sometimes it's just people moving on and or burning out. In some cases, get compassion fatigue, which is really common in the industry. So we developed actually automations to check in with our partners every 90 days if we either haven't had an adoption in that time, or
Yeah,
if they haven't filled out a little form that takes like not even a minute, says, yes, we're still with you. We know we haven't an adoption, but we're still
yeah,
with you. We're still a partner. And that's really helped us sort of both cull from our ranks partners that may not be as engaged, but always welcome them back if they want to come back into the family. And at the same time, stay focused on those who are most committed to making our partnership work.
mm,
And so 5 years, love to be in all 50 states. I'd love to say we'd put ourselves out of business in 5 years because there'd be no more homeless animals who need homes and no more veterans and military families who
yeah,
needed the love of a pet. But I'm not that Pollyannish to believe that will happen, but I could still hold that out as the hope.
yeah. Well, Beth, the work you're doing is great.
Thank
Interesting
you.
career from architecture
Yeah.
to marketing, consulting, vision for businesses, then into nonprofit leadership. You've had a great journey with a good impact. Thank you for serving the people that you serve, and thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.